Good morning, Cami Sawtell with Remax.
Hi, Vicki Nunez at Academy Mortgage.
And we're here again as part 2 with some really good tips for the home buying process. And Vicki here is an amazing local lender that I work oftentimes with. So she and I wanted to provide some more information as more questions have come up from our viewers. So we'll just jump right in. So Vicki, a lot of people will oftentimes ask how long their pre-approval amount is good for. So maybe they got pre-approved with you 2 months ago or 3 months ago, and they want to know how long that lasts.
Well, technically it's indefinitely, as long as you don't change anything. Your credit report is good for 120 days. So after that, we would, once you find a home, we would have to re-pull credit. But as long as you don't change jobs or you don't go out and make a big purchase, as long as everything stays status quo in your finances, then you should be good for whenever you want to buy a house. It's just updating that credit report. That would be all that's necessary.
Okay. What if a person got pre-approved with you 4 months ago, 5, 6 months ago, and then they got married in that time? Would you recommend they start the process over with their spouse, or what would you recommend?
Yes, I would just add that. So okay. I already have a file, I already have their credit report, so then I would just rerun, since it's old anyway, I would just rerun a new credit report jointly, add the wife, add their income, and then see where they fall then.
Gotcha, perfect. So with that, knowing that that's the way that works, that's going to give some good insight. The other question people often, or the other comment people often make is, I don't have enough money for a down payment.
There's lots of programs for no down payment. And when I say no down payment, that means that your loan is 100% funded. There's always costs associated with the loan and other things outside of that. But there's like USDA, which is 100% financing, and there are some parameters that you have to meet to be in that. There's also, you can take a conventional loan or an FHA loan, USDA, VA, and marry it with a down payment assistance program from the Washington State Housing Finance Commission. So then you truly, again, have 100% financing. So there are options even if you don't have a down payment.
Okay. And I love that you mentioned that there are always other costs when it comes to buying. So, because you are using a down payment assistance program, as a buyer, you have to know that there are other fees, such as your inspection fees, your earnest money. So you have to keep that in mind. That's a total separate entity, and that's something that your agent should have already spoken with you about prior to even going through this process. Vicki also will remind you of that, but those are separate, and those do come out of pocket and are expected prior to even going to the closing table.
Right. And then you have loan fees that go with your loan. So typically when someone's doing 100% financing, they're asking the seller to contribute towards our closing costs. So if you don't have the money to pay for your appraisal and all the other things that go with getting a home loan, you're asking the seller then to contribute towards your closing costs. So that it truly is 100% financing, or you pay those fees yourself. So it just depends on how your finances are structured, whether you've got the money to pay those out of pocket, or you're truly looking to walk into a home with no money down.
Exactly, I like that. So with that, keeping in mind, with the inspection fee, the earnest money is due 48 hours after you've gone under contract, and that's a check that's submitted to the escrow company. And then of course the inspection also out of pocket, whatever the inspector charges. And again, that money is due up front. So good to know with that information. Also with the seller's concession that Vicki is talking about, you can oftentimes get that as part of your offer where they will agree to that. However, that's not always the case. And so there are ways that your agent can work with you to buffer your offer, to pay more for the home to cover your own closing costs, but keeping in mind that that is not an obligation on the seller's behalf to cover your closing costs.
And the one thing that a lender will ask you for up front too in those closing costs is the cost of the appraisal. So typically a lender will collect for that before they order the appraisal, just because we can't afford to pay for an appraisal and then have you back out and say, well, I don't want this home. Mm-hmm. We're still obligated to that vendor who went out and did your appraisal to pay them. So you would have your earnest money, you would have your home inspection, and then you should typically be prepared to pay for your appraisal up front.
Absolutely. What is an average appraisal fee?
Typically $800. That's roughly what they're running now.
Sure.
Yeah.
As far as earnest money, you're looking at $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, and an inspection $700 and under. So keep that in mind for your out-of-pocket costs. Another question I get often is a lot of people that work in the restaurant industry or industry where they get tips and they may maybe not provide that on their taxes. So they're making more money than they can prove. What do you have to say to those people?
So the way it works is what you report to the IRS is what we have to use for your income. So if you're getting tip money or any other source of income that you're not reporting to the IRS, we can't use that. So I've had people who, let's just say they get paid tips, they count them on their pay stub, they file their tax return with the tips that they've received, then they're good with that. But I've had people who have gone as far as there's a form in your IRS return that you can fill out that says I had additional amounts of money in tips, and so they've claimed those tips at year end, so we can use that as income. So, but you have to have 2 years of showing that. So it's whatever you have that you've paid taxes on, that's what we're allowed to use for your income.
Perfect. So again, you can't be having money, under your pillow or in a safe anywhere. She's not able. That's fishy, right? Is that what you consider fishy?
It's not called. We can't document the funds as to where they came from. It's part of the federal government laws that you have to be able to source where the money came from. It's you have to be able to prove where those funds came from.
Good to know. Do you have anything else to add about any of these things?
Just
You're the guru here.
Just that when they come in and sit down with me, if they're really looking for 100% financing, I'm going to really go over their closing costs with them. What it costs to do the loan, what it costs for prepaids are, which is your taxes and insurances, getting those set up into a escrow account so that they're paid with your monthly payment. And then how much they would need from the seller, if they did need the seller to pay their closing costs, how much that exactly would be. So we can get it down to pretty much the nitty gritty of how much the seller really needs to pay of the buyer's closing costs for them to get into a home. But other than that, I think you hit all the high points.
Okay. One last thing before we close here is when you work with a lender and you have your credit pulled, it's kind of a big deal to some people, and a lot of people don't want their credit pulled multiple times. So what recommendations or what advice would you have for somebody who maybe hasn't seen any of our videos or doesn't have a ton of buying knowledge that may be speaking with you on a lender behalf and getting pre-approved and then going into another state because they thought, oh, maybe I want to live in Oregon or something?
So in Academy we have a network of people, so I would probably just refer that file to someone who worked in that state, and then their credit doesn't have to be pulled again.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've already pulled the credit. If it's under that 120 days, then it wouldn't have to be pulled again.
Mm-hmm.
I just assign the file to them and they can take care of it in another state.
Because pulling it again and going to a totally separate lender without notifying you, what does that do to them?
It's going to lower their credit scores.
Okay.
It's going to make them take another hit. Yeah, you really wouldn't want to do that. I've had a number of people. I have someone right now that I'm referring to a lender in Wyoming because they decided not to buy here in Washington State, so they're going to buy in Wyoming. So we have Academy lenders in Wyoming, so I'm just going to refer the file to someone there, and they'll be happy to take care of it.
Great, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.
Bye.